This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
And welcome to a very special edition of Capital Connection. It's our Year in Review special report. We're counting down the top 5 news events of 2025 with Michael Geer at the Pennsylvania Family Institute and Jason McGuire with New York Families. What were the biggest stories of the year from Albany and Harrisburg? From 5 to 1, we're going to find out, beginning with the 5th biggest news event in New York State. Jason, we drew straws and you got to go first. So what did you have as your 5th biggest story of the year?
Well, it's been hard for me not to acknowledge the lawfare that has been occurring in our state under Letitia James as the Attorney General. This Attorney General has really sought to tamp down on free speech. She has come after pro-life pregnancy centers, even the president. And lawfare seems to be one of the issues that we have to acknowledge was a major story in 2025.
And a few people have experienced that lawfare quite as personally as you have, Jason. So let's go to Harrisburg. Michael, what did you decide was the 5th biggest story of Pennsylvania this year?
Well, there's a story that comes over from the previous year, and that's the issue of protecting girls' sports, personal privacy, and things. That was a big issue in the 2024 presidential election, remains an issue in Pennsylvania. The challenge is that many people think that because of executive orders coming out of the Trump administration, that issue is resolved, and yet we still have school districts that are allowing boys to play on girls' sports, those sorts of things, locker room privacy violations. But we saw some real positive things like the Dads Defending Daughters press conference that took place with lawmakers like Clint Owlett taking a stand for privacy and for girls' sports.
Yeah. We're counting down the top 5 news stories from Albany and Harrisburg this year, a special edition of Capital Connection. Michael, let's stay in Harrisburg for number 4. What was 4th on your list this year?
Well, this relates to kind of the polarization that we've seen in our society and even the violence that we've seen, and specifically what came here to Pennsylvania with the arson attack on Governor Shapiro's mansion. And that points to the increased polarization, increased violence that we see in society, as well as the anti-Semitism, which was certainly prevalent in what happened with this nutcase throwing a firebomb and putting at risk the governor and his family.
Yeah, I think that's on a lot of people's lists this year when they look back at what happened in Pennsylvania this year. The fact that the governor and his family were unharmed, just amazing that could happen. Jason, 4th biggest story in New York, and why?
Yeah, similar to what Michael just referenced, I have the rise of anti-Semitism here in New York. We began the year looking at this as something that was on the left, and it is. You see those protests, you see what is happening on the college campuses, and you see anti-Semitism there. But in 2025, we began to see that there may be more of this in the right than people are realizing. And I think it's something that we're going to have to come to terms with is that there is racism, there is anti-Semitism, and it doesn't matter if you're left or right. It exists in each wing, and it's something that really we as believers and followers of Jesus Christ are going to have to come to terms with and to recognize and call it out when we see it if we are to recognize the intrinsic and inherent dignity of every individual created in the image of God.
Well said. Hey, 2 down, 3 to go. We're counting down the top 5 news stories / events of 2025 with the Capital Connection crew. You hear them every Friday during the Noon Report. Michael Geer with the Pennsylvania Family Institute and Jason McGuire with New York Families, our most popular radio program we have for good reason. These guys know what they're talking about. They're in the thick of it at the state capitals. Jason, let's stay in Albany. Number 3 on your list this year.
I have the prison guard strike that occurred earlier this year. It was a blow to Governor Kathy Hochul, to her leadership. It's been a blow to the families, to the localities that are impacted in those places. And even to this day, the National Guard is still in these prisons. This is something that's never really been fully rectified. You can also expect to be a major topic in 2026.
Yeah, and who can forget those 3 weeks, I think it was back in February and March, where those corrections officers went on strike. Just a major story for several weeks in New York State. Michael, in Harrisburg, so many stories. We've already mentioned that arson attack. We mentioned the transgender thing in PA. But what was the 3rd biggest story this year in your state?
I think it's one that maybe not getting that much notice, but should, and that was the state of Pennsylvania issuing commercial driver's licenses to what apparently are known terrorists or people from terrorist states, like the driver from Uzbekistan getting a CDL and then being involved in fatal accidents, or even it's being revealed that PennDOT has, through the voter registration that happens at driver's license signups, that have been giving voter registration forms to non-documented or illegal aliens. Kind of a scandal here in Pennsylvania that's not drawing a lot of attention, but has impact on our voter rolls.
Yeah, I know Transportation Secretary Duffy is taking a close look at that. We'll see what comes of it. But that was a huge story, and you're right, it didn't get reported nearly as much as it should. So let's get to it. Now, number 2, down to the final 2. What were the top 2 news stories of the year? Michael, let's stay in Harrisburg. What did you have on your list?
Well, I'm going to say the late state budget, which is becoming kind of old news, or old hat, I guess, a habit of the legislature here. They don't care about that constitutional deadline, apparently.
Yeah.
But the positive in that budget, and this was part of the standoff, was that we avoided the bullet of legalization of commercial sale of marijuana for yet another year. So that was a good thing, even though we had a late budget.
Yeah, saving PA from pot was on my list. I know it's a fight you have been fighting for years, Michael. Unfortunately, Jason, you haven't been able to win that fight in New York. It's legal. But what did you have as the second biggest story this year in New York State?
Well, this is a story that is very important to our organization and maybe isn't, as Michael referenced in an earlier story, not getting as much play as it should, and that's the issue of state-sanctioned suicide. It's going to have a great impact on what happens with end-of-life issues in our state. The whole world of medicine has changed because now you've fractured the relationship between the patient and the doctor. And so this issue of assisted suicide is a major issue late in 2025.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's a huge one. I had that number 1 on my list this year in New York State. Michael, here we are. The biggest story, the most impactful event of the past 12 months in Pennsylvania. So many major issues this year, but if you had to settle on one, what would be your choice as the biggest story of 2025?
Well, I think I chose this one as number 1 because it takes us into 2026 as well, and that was the off-year elections, not only the Supreme Court elections and what rulings will come from this liberal Supreme Court, but also then what we saw in sweeps of school boards and other things. Many Pennsylvanians were just not awake or aware of the need to be involved and engaged in elections, and hopefully 2026, they'll see what happened in 2025 and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to roll up my sleeves, I'm going to get engaged in the political realm.
Yeah, don't sit this one out, guys. Don't sit it out. Too much at stake. Here we are, Jason. I could say it as well as I did with Michael. There were so many major events this year in New York State, in Albany in particular, at the state capitol. But if you had to pick just one, what would be your choice as the most significant news item of 2025?
I think it's the foothold that democratic socialism is making here in the Empire State. That was seen most clearly with the election of New York City mayoral-elect Zohran Mamdani, just the last election cycle, and he will soon be coming in to see what he will do now that he will be the mayor. But it isn't just about one man. This is something we've seen in the legislature. We're watching Democrats that are now have a major portion of their party as becoming this democratic socialist, or at least leans that direction. And that is going to shake up politics in our state house here in the year to come and years to come. And it's going to change a lot of Americans' lives if socialism gains much more of a foothold in this country.
Well, here we are, guys, at the end of the year. And as we celebrate the holidays and look forward to another year, you guys are looking forward to what's coming up. And, of course, a major election, the midterms, control of Congress at stake, a number of governorships at stake as well in both New York and Pennsylvania. What are the issues you're going to be paying close attention to, Michael, in 2026?
Well, we're going to be doing a lot of education here in Pennsylvania about the issue of physician-assisted suicide, as it's called, because we know that it's a train that is coming. We see the challenges there in the state of New York, and Pennsylvania is not immune to that.
Yeah. Jason, it's been a challenging year for you, but as you and your organization kind of shakes the dust off of 2025, what are you looking ahead to in 2026 as the major issues you'll be tackling?
Yeah, some years more than others, you're anxious to kind of put behind you, and I think 2025 is one of those.
Yeah.
And yet it's a platform that God has allowed us, and we see 2026 as a year of transformational growth for our organization. And I think two major things that we're going to see in the coming year. One is we do have elections this year, and they're going to be enormous for which direction our state goes. But in addition to that, I think there's a desire to see a greater Christian witness. I was at the Capitol just last week, and there was the so-called holiday tree there, and there was the menorah, and there was a Kwanzaa item as well. But there was not the nativity set. We couldn't even call it a Christmas tree. And, I think that it just demonstrates how in public life, we just don't have a whole lot of Christian witness. And organizationally, we want to be encouraging people to be courageous in their witness in the coming year. And that's another thing we'll be working on in 2026.
Amen. And I just want to put this challenge out to anybody who's been blessed. And I know thousands of listeners every week are blessed by what they hear on Capital Connection. If you are blessed by the ministry that both Jason and Michael have and you'd like to give, I know a lot of people like to give this time of year. Michael, where can folks give to the Pennsylvania Family Institute?
pafamily.org/donate.
And if you'd like to help out Jason, ministry is not cheap. And you know that, Jason, in New York State. Where can folks go online to support you financially?
NewYorkFamilies.org.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.